Yo, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the basketball community. If you guys want more basketball talk and discussions, tune in to Basketball Conversation every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball-related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. For those of y'all who are new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. And please spread the word about the channel as well. So this is the kind of video that I've always kind of thought about for a long time in my own basketball head. And that is what the Celtics could have been if Len Bias didn't die. Okay. Because this was probably one of the most intriguing ones I've ever, had to think about. Because when you think about the legacy of Len Bias, you think about a guy that was pretty much a 6'8" forward. Okay. Who was pretty much a raw athletic player who could run the floor, who's very athletic and can score at any point on the floor. When he attended the University of Maryland, he was viewed as a raw athlete, but very undisciplined. But he turned it around and became an All-American player. And during his junior year, he basically led the ACC in scoring and was named the ACC's Player of the Year. Then during his senior year, in his overtime victory against the top-ranked North Carolina Tar Heels, where he scored 35 points, including 7 in the last 3 minutes of regulation and 4 in overtime in that victory. And he also collected his second ACC Player of the Year award. So pretty much, this guy was going to be a guy that people were going to look to, that basically was going to be another star in the making. And the Celtics had a good idea of who this guy was going to be, because you have to remember, during 1984, Red Auerbach, who was the president and the general manager of the Boston Celtics, dealt his two-guard, Gerald Henderson, to the Seattle Supersonics in 1984 for the second overall pick, which turned out to be the second overall pick, I should say. And he was the kind of player that was going to be the next person in the next line of the great Celtic players, because after that 85-86 season, which was one of the greatest Celtic teams, and perhaps one of the greatest teams of all time, okay, Bird, McHale, and Robert Parish were going to enter their twilight years. Bird, during 86, was 29. McHale was 28. Robert Parish was 32. And so Len Bias was going to be that guy that was going to play either the small forward or the power forward positions in the event when those two guys start to age out and start losing some of their most productive play, if y'all are understanding what I'm telling you. And so I'm telling you, Len Bias, if he didn't ultimately tragically died from that drug overdose, he was going to be the guy that was going to help the Celtics remain in contention. And you think about this for a moment. Combining with Len Bias and then the draft pick of Reggie Lewis 2 years later, you think about that for a moment. The Celtics could have been, again, another elite team, but also would have delayed the run of the bad boy Pistons. All right. And perhaps, not saying it would have, but perhaps it would have delayed the inevitable rise of the Chicago Bulls during the 90s, because you would have also had to deal with Len Bias and Reggie Lewis in their top peak. If you haven't seen Reggie Lewis play, he was perhaps one of the most well-versed out two guards you ever see. A guy that can score, he can run the break, he can shoot, and can play defense. In fact, Michael Jordan even admitted that Reggie Lewis gave him all the problems that he can handle. So you think about that, and think about the impact that Len Bias would have had on that team. You best believe that the Celtics would have been in great shape to take over the NBA. I firmly believe that. I think that if Len Bias had not died tragically from that cocaine overdose, he would have been one of the best, forwards in the NBA. He could play both the small forward and power forward positions. He was raw. He was athletic. And if you would have put a good system in there like the Celtics, I think he would have honed down his troubled past. And I think that he would have flourished very, very well and would have not gotten himself into trouble. But the sad part is, it pretty much went down all over their heads, because by the time he drove back to his campus at the University of Maryland on that Thursday of June 19th of 86, approximately 2 a.m., his friends, basically were inducing cocaine, and Len Bias overdosed, and by 6:32 a.m. in Maryland, he ended up dying of a cardiac arrhythmia, basically relating to his cocaine overdose. I mean, you think about that for a moment. You think about how drugs pretty much ruined America during the 70s and the 80s. You think about all the lives that took during that whole time when cocaine was like the biggest drug that people wanted to try. You know what I mean? It really affected a lot of people, and it really affected the NBA very, very hard. I remember the Phoenix Suns had to basically release half of their team because most of the guys were basically on cocaine. There were a lot of players in the NBA during that time that were basically using drugs and using recreational drugs behind everybody else's back. And it just was unfortunate, man. It was just unfortunate because there's pretty much no way to describe how the Celtics would have been as a championship team. And then after that, the Celtics began a huge decline in terms of their productive years. All right. 86 was basically their last championship season of that era because the Lakers were gonna improve. And more importantly, I think that with Len Bias and Reggie Lewis at the helm, I think that the Lakers would have not won back-to-back titles. I think they would have won at least maybe 3 or 4, and that's about it. Because I think the Celtics would have taken 87 and beaten the Pistons in 88 and probably beaten the Lakers again. So you think about that for a moment. They would have won maybe at least 2 more championships combined with the 3 that they had. But by that time, the 86-87 season, the team was basically, down on its luck because the key players were getting old. They were getting worn down because Casey Jones was forced to play them heavy minutes, and it started taking its toll. Bird was having back problems. McHale had a broken bone in his foot. Robert Parish was having ankle problems. Danny Ainge was having ankle problems, and Dennis Johnson was also having problems with his health there too. And then Scott Whitman broke his leg. That pretty much ended his season. Bill Walton's foot was coming back reared on his head once again, and was never the same player ever again. So pretty much that team, man, that team in 87 was pretty much the last time that they would ever make the finals. And what they could have been with Len Bias, I think it would have changed their fortunes. I think that would have been the year. I would think they would have taken over the NBA. They would have delayed. They probably would have stopped the Pistons from winning any championships, and they would have maybe delayed the rise of the Michael Jordan Bulls during the 90s, because you would have had to deal with both Len Bias and Reggie Lewis during the early 90s. They would have given teams a lot of problems. And you would think about that. If Len Bias and Reggie Lewis would have been together after Bird and McHale and Parish basically and playing on the final years of their careers, this would have stopped the rise of the Cleveland Cavaliers, but also this would have delayed the rise of both the New York Knicks and maybe the Indiana Pacers during the early 90s too. So you think about that. Think about how all those facts would have came into play if Len Bias would have lived and played his NBA career. I mean, things would have changed probably for the worse for those teams. But unfortunately for that, things worked out differently. And then basically the Pistons took over in 88, 89, and then ultimately the Bulls would have taken over as a dominant team in the 90s. But you think about all those scenarios. All these scenarios would have been very, very interesting if Len Bias and Reggie Lewis would have been alive and would have played together for probably at least 10 to 12 seasons. That would have been very, very interesting. But you can all you can do is just think about it and speculate. And I've really felt that if Len Bias had not perished and not would have felt for the habit of cocaine, he would have been one of the greats in the game, because of his raw athletic ability and his ability to score, run the break, and perhaps the most complete athlete you would have had since Michael Jordan. And I think that Michael Jordan would have had a whole lot of trouble facing against that. You know what I mean? And so that's just how I view about it, man. You think about all these things, how much drugs and, recreational drugs during the 80s pretty much, ruined and perhaps tarnished a lot of people. And this is one of them. It was a kid that, died way too early. He was going to have a great career. He was going to have a tremendous time in the NBA, and he died very tragically at the age of 22 because of a drug overdose. So it is what it is, though, man. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section.